Alert Medic 1 respond.
3, 2, 1.
You're listening to the Alert Medic 1 podcast, the premier emergency medical services podcast with your hosts Mustafa Siddiq and Ken Sanner.
Hello and welcome back to the Alert Medic 1 podcast. My name is Mustafa Siddiq. Ken can't join us today because I'm actually at the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland. I'm taking their FEMA Emergency Management Basic Academy. Today's discussion, I'm really excited to have two guests with me. They're two classmates that I have, and they really bring diversity to the project. They're both fire department guys who have transitioned to EM. And so when I say EM, I mean emergency management, not emergency medicine. But they really bring a robust background of where they come from, how they do things differently, but also how oftentimes we run into same problems. So first, I'd like to introduce Captain Genaro Rocha Jr., and he likes to be called JR. So JR is a fire captain for the Salt River Fire Department, serving the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community for over 17 years. He was also a member of the Armed Forces with the United States Marine Corps. Within his career, he has served various functions. He gained experience through numerous wildland deployments as a wildland coordinator for his fire department, and developed a culturally sensitive public education program. I think that's a theme that you're going to see with a lot of JR's work is the culturally sensitive, spin to it that oftentimes gets overlooked when we're dealing with marginalized populations, right? So JR, welcome.
Thank you, Mustafa, for having me.
We also have Jeff Taylor with us today. So Jeff is an assistant fire chief and emergency manager and also a Missouri paramedic. He's been in the game for 25 years.
25 years, yeah.
Yeah, and he has worked in both rural and urban interfaces throughout the state of Missouri. Who are you a paramedic with right now?
I'm a paramedic currently and an assistant fire chief and emergency manager with the city of Riverside, which is right outside of Kansas City. Really pretty small little community. Bring a different aspect to the environment is our primary is an advanced life support pumper or an ALS fire unit. And then we have an outside agency comes in and does our transport. So that transitioning off of a medic unit and into a fire-based service that only does first response ALS it brings a completely different aspect to both urban and rural medicine.
So is that a private company that does your transport?
No, actually, we contract our primary city with Kansas City Fire Department. They staff, many ALS units within the city of Kansas City, so they just run into our area. And then we have two unincorporated areas that we also cover, and AMR actually does the transport for them in the contracts through the EMS through them. So
okay. So can you describe your fire department, who you serve, where you serve, JR?
So we serve the community of the Pima Maricopa Indian community, and they have a population of around 12,000 registered tribal community members, and about 6,000 of them live there locally. We have 4 stations that are all ALS stations. We have technical rescue team, wildland team. Everyone in the department has to have their accreditation to provide wildland urban interface for the community. And then we have various programs that we do to reach out to the community, such as Explorer programs, etc.
So, and I didn't mention it before, but JR is also a NREMT, correct?
I am.
And you're also a certified CPR and first aid instructor. So the big topic that we wanted to talk about today was, it stemmed from a conversation that JR and I had last week while we were actually eating lunch. And JR, I don't want to jump too much into the story, but you described your experience with tribal elders and trying to get buy-in, right, and trying to get them to follow some sort of the emergency management projects that you had been dealing with. And what really struck me was you said that, a lot of the folks before you had tried to be superficial with it, right? And I can't help but think, but that's probably a common theme throughout many individuals from the outside trying to go in to deal with these tribal elders. And what you said that struck me the most was, you have to build that relationship, and you have to, quoting you, you said break bread with them. And that really struck me because, although the tribes are very, unique individuals, unique communities to have to serve, but at the same time, I'm sure we can transpose your method of, providing that human interaction, that human experience over to many of the populations that we see that are often marginalized, right? Whether it's the minorities that, statistically we see aren't given the same treatment that, others are, or specific patient demographics. So, folks that suffer with drug addiction, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that, about where, your experience initially, what you saw and what worked for you with the tribal communities?
Well, I think, Mustafa, early in my career, I realized that the challenges that we were having stemmed from the type of people that we had working for there, and also the type of people that live there. So with that being said, the majority of the population outside the reservation, they value time and money, okay? If you are on a reservation, they value relationship more than the time and the money. So as I said, breaking bread and having these conversations with them, meeting with them when the skies are blue are very critical. And it really starts at the boots on the ground level, because once you start interacting with the community, you have an opportunity to start that process by just being polite. Just doing the job we signed up for. And, obviously you talk about the challenges. And one of the things you had mentioned to me was the similar calls with some of the challenges that are out there. But myself as an officer, I promote within my crew and anyone that works for my crew on overtime that we will provide that service. There is no you're better than anyone. And as far as getting that relationship built, I was fortunate enough in the beginning of my career to do public education. So I immediately was working to make conditions better and help educate the children and the elders, which are the most important thing to any tribal community. And with that being said, that's when I had the opportunity to meet and greet, spend time with people, learn about their culture, learn about what their value system looks like. And at the same time, using my value system, it worked for me. But all too often, we get people that are from outside the reservation who have not been exposed to the reservation becoming frustrated because they are trying to provide a service and don't quite understand that every reservation is different and every situation is different. But at the end of the day, I tell them that you probably need to look at how you're conducting yourself, because if you're not understanding their culture, then you're not going to be able to provide that service. I'll give you an example. When I first got there, they'd tell me that some of the elders, particularly the women, would look down and they wouldn't be looking you in the eye. And so, these are simple things that if you're not aware of, you would think that they're actually not listening to you, okay? And you'd be surprised at what people will tell you if you listen. So, you really got to use your skills. It's not just the stuff that you've learned along the way in classes. I mean, you have to put yourself out there and remember why you're there.
Yeah. So what are some strategies that you use to, the actual, when you're training these new folks, right? What are some strategies that you use to try to ingrain that? Because so from my experience, right? So I'm Muslim, right? Traditionally, some of the things that my family would do, may seem, a little bit different to, it's someone from, the United States who may see it as, good, bad, whatever. An example of that is, my mom is very reserved when it comes to men, right? That's just something she does. In an emergent situation, she'll talk to anyone, right. But the headscarf, right, can be off-putting to some individuals, just because of the current culture. What are some strategies that you or your department use to try to mitigate that, try to bring down that wall?
So the department provides a brief cultural diversity class that they have during their orientation and when they're going to start working for the department, along with some other tools that they give them. But as for me, what I like to do is volunteer, get out there. If there's something needs to be, it needs to be supported by the fire department showing up and serving. You got to show up. You got to be there. Even if it's just to show your face, that's big. That's important. So I try to make sure that every opportunity that we have to be able to be out there with the community and figure out a way to help them out, I have my people engaged so that they're reminded that their job isn't just fighting fire and extrication and EMS and all guts and glory. It's about treating people the right way. You have to be a steward to do this job well. So that's what I promote within my firehouse and within the fire department.
JR, you bring up some amazing concepts, and I just want to take a second and kind of focus on some of the things that you've talked about. Is the true difference of American culture versus those other cultures in our community, where it comes from. We're talking about money and time and spending time with family and stuff like that, and then the changes that you're talking about that you deal with on a reservation, where time with those other people. But the biggest thing is that I continue to hear the same thing when we talk about dealing with patients, and a lot of providers and a lot of departments say, well, we are not a business. We are a business. We are totally a business, and our product is customer service. And and I think that as we continue to press forward and we continue to deal with things such as burnout and repeat patients, and we're trying to find ways to mitigate those issues, is that I think we lose a lot of the focus into the reason that we're here in the first place, and that is to provide amazing customer service to those people in need. And I used to have a boss a long time ago that says at 3:00 in the morning, the person across from you asking you for help does not care that you've been up all night. They don't care that you're on your 20th run. Is that they see this as a true emergency, and they expect you to provide that customer service. And as a organization or as a culture in EMS, I think that's some of the things that we are losing focus on today, especially as we continue to burn out these amazing providers. And it doesn't just matter if East, West Coast, Central United States, or in these different cultural communities. I think that we're losing that as a combined combined organization. And I think that it's really amazing to see that you're providing that to not just those in your department, but you're also breaking bread, as you said, with those leaders within your organization, and making sure that they understand that that's what you're really there to promote, is that customer service.
And I think what both of you guys are describing is community outreach. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we love to act like we do, or not even act like we do. We love to think that we do it. Yeah. But when push comes to shove, I don't think we're that good at it. And that's just, from my, experience, especially when it comes to, populations that are, disadvantaged economically. Right. So, and now I'm going to ask you guys another question. How do you penetrate that, though? Because there is also apprehension from the population itself, right?
Right.
So yeah.
So to answer the first part of that, the culture within the fire service can either be positive or negative. and that's with any organization throughout the country. What we have to focus on is creating that culture that, yes, this is how we do this. This is how we do this all the time, regardless, and not fall into any of that negativity, because you're going to have those type of people working for you regardless. But with that being said, it's the officer's responsibility, the supervisor's responsibility to not only promote that, but to lead by example and hold people accountable when they don't, because it's all too common that the sewing circle starts getting going and people start yapping about different things that are going on, and they get into this negative just environment, which it's like a disease, and it's our responsibility as officers, command staff, to make sure that we're going out and doing this within our own culture of the fire service.
Yeah. And you couldn't have said it better. And and what a punch in the face to our community, our caretaking community. And the fact is that the only way that we do this is a shift in thought. It is a total shift in action in the way that we are treating our communities. And you're 100% correct. And that starts with the leadership at the very top by expressing their values and expectations of those that are serving underneath them. And in so many situations that we see those leaders, it doesn't matter if it's at the very top all the way through mid-management, is that we see them teaching or looking at expressing, some discontent about their job and discontent about the community they work in. And I think a lot of that a lot of that negativity, it always filters, and we filters down, and to the point to where those subordinates, those people that are on the streets and dealing with the patients, they're like, this is okay to do. This is okay to treat people like this, because I hear this from the leadership above me. How many organizations do you really see follow their vision statements, their mission statements? Right. And how many of those leaders do you really see express their values, morals, and ethics in today's EMS world or fire service world? And I feel that, to be successful in changing the perceptions of the EMS provider towards those people, because let's be honest, we are dealing with more poverty now than we have ever seen before. And so many times we deal with those people that call an ambulance for a hay nail or a transport and stuff, and we get burnt out of that. And I feel that, those crews are getting burnt out, but I think the leadership at the top needs to start and say, time out, guys. We understand that you're doing a job and that you're burnt out and that you're busy and you continue to do this over and over again, but we have expectations that we need to make sure that we are meeting. And those start with the top.
I think that,
go ahead.
I think you're absolutely right with that. The other side of the coin is realizing that when we're having these issues and we are having problems from our staff, one of the challenges we've been having is, we hire people from outside the community, and they have not been taught that value system yet. They have never been exposed to the value system that we're talking about. So they come in, or they come from another department that did not have that value system, and they show up and it's like, we don't do things that way here. So we really have to emphasize how we're going to be doing the business that we do day in, day out, and lead by example.
So I think that's such a key point. I have two questions for you guys. So number one, Jeff, you bring up the great point of burnout, right? And I think that's a whole different conversation I don't want to get too deep into. But to a point, doesn't that have to get addressed too? Like why we're doing that, right? And that goes into, various other strategies
Absolutely.
that we're trying to mitigate that.
Because
Because there's absolutely no excuse for, bad attitudes, stuff like that. But we also can't ignore the elephant in the room of, the what's causing these attitude issues to a point.
And I think that we need to take that point, and without going down the rabbit hole too far, is that, you know, our business is not going to get slower. Ever. We continue to get busier. We continue to add things to an EMS worker's plate, such as community paramedicine and so many other things to try to find out how to better serve the community and deal. Let's be honest, those programs are being put into place to deal with some of the burnout and some of the stuff. But I honestly feel that, you know, us as a community and as an EMS community, we are missing a couple of things. Number one, the burnout, the PTSD, and the other things that we're not thinking of, because everybody has a home life, and home lives are stressful, and it doesn't matter if you've got bills to pay and you're not going to meet your bills, but you've got all of these other aspects of an employee and as a provider. You know, the burnout, they're coming in and they're working a 24-hour shift and they never come off a fire truck or an ambulance. Let me rephrase that: an ambulance. Fire trucks are not such a thing, but you know, they're not getting meals. And you know, I think as an organization and a society, we really need to start looking at how are we treating our responders when it comes to max call load and the amount of calls that it can run in a 24-hour period or a 12 or an 8 or whatever. And I think that we really need to start as a leadership. And I'm going to go back to leadership because I think that this is where it starts, is making sure that we are paying attention to our people and not just the run numbers. And I feel that us as a society of providers, we have lost the human factor into taking care of people. We now see paramedics, EMTs as those that are just grunting on the ambulance or even on a fire truck for that matter. And we're burning them out to the point to where they're leaving the business and they're opening this huge hole. I mean, everywhere you look in the country, we have this huge paramedic, hole, and we were trying to find different ways of filling that. And I think a lot of that has to deal with, you once again is talking about the elephant in the room and saying the reason that we are burning these people out and the reason that we're having such high turnover is because they don't want to do it. They're to the point where they love giving care, they love providing the service, but they're just done. And I think that that's something that we have to address. And I can't wait to hear how you guys are addressing it, especially on a reservation.
Well, the best approach that we've utilized is when we're having that same call over and over and over, it's our responsibility to get out of the problem and into the solution. And the way you do that is a lot of times there's this gap between how far you take the patient. Do we just drop them off at the hospital, or do we utilize the support services that are within our community to get them the help that they need? And a lot of times people say, or, you'll have responders say, that's not my job, but it really is, because unless you want to keep going back for the same thing over and over, you have to, one, educate them, and two, and help them understand this is an emergency and this is not, but also explain to them what you're taking away from the rest of the community should they have a real emergency. And then the other thing is that you're actually following up and contacting adult social services, or contacting the service that they really need to have support them, so that the problem gets solved. Okay, if they need to get in a nursing home, who do we contact to make that happen? And then follow up to see that it's actually being done.
Hey, so we're finishing. We're going to finish this episode up right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. So when we start up our next episode, I really want to get into bridging that gap, because that's something I really like. Because I think that's something that emergency departments are dealing with as well. It's not suddenly, and of course they have case management and stuff like that, but getting the resources people need to prevent that, that frequent flyer. And also, I want to after we discuss that, we'll transition into penetrating these, the populations, getting through to so many populations that are, resistant towards our help. And I really want to talk about your experience with the tribes to see, what strategies you utilized and how we can use that at a greater level. Well, thank you very much for listening in. So please be sure to follow us on alertmedic1.com. Our podcast is on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Please be sure to give us a rating. Let us know how we're doing. Follow us on Facebook, AlertMedic1. Follow us on Twitter, alert_medic1. We're working on a larger social media footprint as well. As we always say, this is a project driven by you, the listener, and the community that we're trying to serve. With that, please send any feedback, any positive, negative, anything you'd like to see differently. We want to be a resource for you. Thank you very much for listening in. That's all for now.
You've been listening to the Alert Medic 1 podcast, the premier emergency medical services podcast with your hosts Mustafa Siddiq and Ken Sanner.